Hello and welcome to the Paula's Place podcast. Today we're joined by Steve Leventhal, the CEO of WorldBeing and a globally recognized leader in mental health and resilience programming. Since 2008, Steve has dedicated his work to empowering some of the world's most marginalized communities, especially young women and girls, helping them build the mindset, agency, and resilience needed to transform their futures. Under this leadership, his programs have impacted thousands, driving measurable improvements in well-being, education, and self-advocacy. A pioneer in applying positive psychology in low and middle income countries, Steve is also an award-winning practitioner, honoured by the World Congress of Positive Psychology for his outstanding global impact. With a career spanning the private sector, global non-profits, and humanitarian innovation, he brings a wealth of experience and insight to the conversation. So I say to you, Steve, welcome and thank
Oh,
you for
thank
joining
you.
me.
Thank you for
Yeah.
your kind introduction, Paula. It's great to be here. Thanks.
Oh, lovely to have you. And I'm sure there's way more to add than that. But anyway, let's dive in. So, Steve, can you share how your own attitudinal healing journey began and what drew you to this work in the first place?
Back in well, let me actually start with, I think in the 80s,
Mhm.
1980s, which seems so long ago now for some of us. Um, I got really interested in I guess what I would say, the intersection of Western psychology and Eastern thought.
Yeah.
In fact, when I did my undergraduate work in college, way back when, you could go to a bookshelf and find maybe 10 books on the subject, in a typical bookstore in the US. And of course, now you have shelves and shelves of that kind of work intersection. So I did a lot of study of both Western psychology as well as Eastern thought, particularly Chinese, Japanese, Buddhism, and Taoist thought. So that was really my background in terms of my own sort of psychological and spiritual journey, I guess, if you want to call it that. And then I forget exactly who, excuse me, but somehow someone introduced me to Love is Letting Go of Fear, Jerry's seminal first book. I'm going to say that was probably in the early mid 90s. Um, and that book, like so many millions of other people, really spoke to me, as well as Teach Only Love, which really grabbed me. And I guess it just really dovetailed really well with my own study. Um, and then it was interesting, just how these things work. A few years later, maybe 4 or 5 years after I'd read those books, a friend of mine said, "Hey, I've just read this book, and I know some of the people on the board of directors of the Center for Attitudinal Healing, and they've asked me to join the board, and I was wondering what you think." And I was like, "Oh, well, that's great. I mean, what I think is I love the work, and I think it'll be a great fit. So go for it." And so then he was
Yeah.
on the board for a number of years. And then years later, I mean, really years later, 10 years later, I'm guessing, or more,
Mm.
he was the one who I think started this sort of chain of events around me being recruited in as the new executive director. And
All
that was
right.
back in, I think had reached out to me maybe around 2006. And then
Yeah.
somewhere around the end of 2007, early 2008, I joined full time.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Okay. So, and Worldbeing began as the Centre for Attitudinal Healing and has grown into a global organisation. How have the core principles of attitudinal healing shaped the evolution of Wellbeing's
Excuse me.
work?
It's interesting because I mean, it's been a fascinating journey. So I think maybe to answer that question, maybe let me take you through the journey a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
When I first joined the center,
Mm.
I had worked in the private sector for a number of years and quite frankly hated every single day of it. And
Yeah.
in 2000, I had a near-death experience in a rollover car accident. And long story short, without going through all of that, I had a number of insights as I was stumbling. around upside down in a car. And one of which was that I hadn't done what I came here to do, and I wasn't quite ready to die yet, and it was time to get to work. And so I shifted into development work, international development work in 2000, 2001. Worked in Zimbabwe for a number of years and some other work and so on and so forth. But along the way, long story short, I felt there was this big gap in
Mm,
how the development sector, which is, by the way, a multi-billion-dollar huge sector that many people remain sort of unaware of, that there was this really gap, what I felt in the work itself, where the sector itself is really good at like the external things, like build the hospital, build the school, build the road, build the infrastructure, those
mm,
kind of things. But the internal work of helping people who have been mired in discrimination or multi-generational poverty and so on, gender inequities, uh, helping them to transform really from what we call the inside out.
mm,
So you can build the school, but what happens inside the school? And then does the child themselves have the sort of self-identity and a certain set of values and even the ability for introspection and so on in order to take advantage of these shifts that are maybe happening at a macro level or external to them? So long story short, when I joined the center, it was because I saw this opportunity to bring attitudinal healing along with some other practices, like you mentioned, positive psychology in the introduction, and some others that I felt would be, uh, you know, synergistic, if you will.
yeah.
That there was an opportunity to bring that kind of work into these communities in a way that leverage, like, let's call it local wisdom, as
Mm,
well as these sort of
mm,
evidence-based Western techniques and methodologies and thought practices and so on and so forth that we have discovered over the years ourselves,
yeah.
and integrate that into some kind of a program that could result, importantly, not just only or solely in internal transformation, but actually have a empowering impact for shifts in the community at large.
Yeah. Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's all a mouthful, but that was my thought process. And what I felt in attitudinal healing, continue to feel, I mean, we still teach it, of course, was that those certain core principles really lent themselves to, I mean, all of attitudinal healing lends itself to a universal type of framework and universal type of thought process. But that within attitudinal healing, there was basically a value set that I felt would be really important for working in multiple communities that have different sets of issues, different sets of challenges, different types of conflicts, and so on, but
Mm,
something that would really appeal at a universal level, no matter who you were. And I found the same in much of positive psychology as well, that it's not about what divides us and separates us, but what joins us. And so that
yeah.
principle of joining in attitudinal healing, I think, is one of the real fundamental bases of,
Mm,
you know,
mm.
foundations of our work. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And Steve, you talk about the inner well-being too as foundational to global change. What does inner well-being mean in practice for people facing adversity in places like India, Kenya, and Rwanda?
So that's a really great question. It's actually a very complex question because in
Yeah,
some of
yeah.
our research, what we found is, we ask kids about well-being and their
Yeah.
own definition of well-being is not necessarily the same, in community.
Yeah.
So, the first thing definitely is it's all about meeting people where they are, always is,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
Not where we want them to be or a language we hope they know.
Yeah.
Um, but really meeting them, yeah, based on the challenges that they're facing. Could be
Mm,
post-genocide in Rwanda, which is now, 25 years ago, but still shows up in multi-generational trauma.
yes.
Um, it could be, as a Maasai community in Africa where we used to work with huge issues around female genital mutilation, FGM.
Mm.
In India, it could be, gender issues around early marriage and so on. So,
Mm.
um, I think, as I was saying earlier, one of the key issues is really about when we talk about inner well-being, that we are appealing to, the universal principles that bring us together, right?
Mm.
And we're in a
Mhm.
time, right? We're in a time where we're so focused on what separates us,
Yeah.
that we've lost track of that universality of the human experience. So when we do a program in a particular community, like from the outset, all the way back to 2008. I mean, we started I think we launched the first program in India. Yeah, the first training in India was in 2009 with just 100 girls.
Mm.
Um, in 2025 alone, we reached over 3 point something million children. So we're at
Wow.
over 4.2 million children, I think, at this point, over 250,000 school teachers trained. So
Really?
my
Wow.
my point being is that how do you do that work without losing the core of it?
Yeah.
It's, ultimately about these principles that join us rather than divide us.
Yes. Yeah.
And I would put those down to love, compassion, gratitude, and
Mm.
forgiveness, the big
Yeah.
four. So
Mm.
that's what we teach, and we teach them,
Yeah.
of course, in a way that is appropriate to that community. And so
Yeah.
when we designed the first program and all the way up till now, like our goal was, let's design a program that's like, let's call it 85% universal. And that
Mm.
15%
Mhm.
is what you need to localize to the context. So
Yes.
local
Yeah.
stories, local tribal wisdom,
Yeah.
making sure the vocabulary you use it may not be attitudinal healing vocabulary or Western vocabulary, right? It might be some other term or
Yeah.
notion that they use for, the idea of service, for example.
Mm.
So that those kinds of things we test really, you know, intentionally
Yeah.
prior to launching a program.
Yeah.
And anytime we do a program, we do pre and post assessments and so on. And part of it is focus groups with kids and school
Right.
teachers to understand what they understood and what could be better.
Yeah, yeah, and using and local teachers, obviously,
Yes.
using the community. Yeah, yeah,
So one
yeah.
of the big
Cool.
shifts that we made um, a number of years ago, when I first started, I mean, a lot of it was kind of hit and miss. So we started
Hmm.
with some school teachers. We found there was some really interesting results in the school, like very dramatically, very quickly.
Yeah.
But then I took it to we went to a community of, I think it was about four slum communities in a state called Surat, which is in India. And we had about 1,000 girls there. And for that, we trained barely functionally literate slum women, community
Yeah.
women. I forget how
Yes.
many I trained. I don't know, 150, 200 or something like that,
Ah.
for 5 days in a zillion degrees heat and, and, and babies everywhere and lots of different local dialects going on and so forth. There was a migrant population. It was absolutely fascinating and incredible amount.
Yeah.
Um, but long story short, uh, so in that context, we trained community women. And then
Yeah.
eventually I was talking to someone who eventually became one of our larger funders. And I was asking them about, what do you think about long-term growth and sustainability? Should we work in communities or schools or whatever? And his advice, which we took to heart, was that even though we still have millions of children in many of these countries out of school, that trend is changing in a positive direction, and very
Mm.
much so, and it has made huge strides over the last 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
So we, at that point, decided to focus in on school systems. And when we first tested the program, for the first several years, we would train the school teachers, our team would train the school teachers
Mm.
ourselves, and the school teachers would facilitate a 1 hour per week program with the kids.
Yeah.
But at this point, about 3 years ago, we made a major shift to, the technical term is systems change, which is
Mm.
basically a fancy way of saying now we train the teacher training institutes within the
Right.
school system, so
Okay.
that it's not a parallel separate program being funded by funders. It's
Hmm.
funders funding us so we can train education system to take up the program, put it into textbooks, put into their teacher training curriculum, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So that has led to massive increase in the number of kids that we could reach. And now that we don't train the school teachers ourselves, the trainers within the education departments, right, the education ministries are doing the training. So
Wow.
that's how all of that becomes sustainable. So maybe, for example,
Yeah.
we train, let's call it 1,000 master trainers over 3 countries, or I forget what the number is.
Mm.
But they in turn then go out and train the school teachers
Yes, yeah,
to do
yeah.
the program.
So, and that would help your reach too, wouldn't it? If you're getting into
Yeah,
the
so the
systems
reach
themselves. Yeah.
explodes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So our goal is 30 million children within the next 5 years.
Oh God, Steve. Wow. That's wow, wow. And I've been looking at your website too, and it's just remarkable the things that you're doing out there and that you've done, and
That's
just to
very kind of you.
listen to
Yeah.
that. Um, and I was imagining as you were talking about working with the slum woman of that particular part of India, were there classrooms? Were there anything set up, or was it?
We did the training in a little, I don't know, a small little
Mm,
room within within the slum, and then we
yeah,
just jammed everybody in there. And then I think some of them were done. I'm sorry, it's kind of a long time ago now. So
yeah, that's okay.
I think it's about 15
Yeah,
years, yeah, 2011. So I
yeah,
think it was actually we ended up doing it in they were community. It was a community program, but we reached out to the schools and they gave us
yeah,
space within the schools to
yeah,
do the
yeah,
program.
yeah,
I think it was like
yeah.
4 schools or something. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Steve, can you share a story or any other examples that illustrated transformation that you've seen in young people through the Wellbeing program? Is there
Oh, I could
something
be
that
here for hours doing
yeah,
that.
I know, but just maybe one that stands,
Let
that
me give
yeah.
you, that's a great question. Let me give you, first of all, like we're really well known for our research at this point. So let me give you sort of like a
Right.
data point around that, and then let
Mhm.
me give you some stories. So
Yeah.
one of the really interesting things is, um, I mean, just I guess to sort of demonstrate the power of the transformation is one of the things that we really discovered early on was, um, particularly when working with girls, the very fundamental sort of self-identity was extremely, for lack of a better word, limiting or limited, right? In terms of
Yeah.
what they felt was possible
Mm.
and what they felt was even, what kinds of things they could even affect on their own life or their communities, to have influence. And so in psychological terms, the term for that is agency, or
Mhm.
is a tool that measures what's called self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is basically your basic fundamental belief
Yeah.
that my thoughts and my beliefs and actions can have an effect on my external environment,
Mm. Mm.
which is really quite profound. I mean, we just take that for granted, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think about something, I have a belief about something, I have an action, and I can change some kind of circumstance, or I can,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So
Yeah.
we can measure that. There's tools for measuring
Mhm.
self-efficacy, and in our research, we found that very really clearly that, like, for example, girls that were not in our program, self-efficacy was basically plummeting during
Ah.
their teen years, which is the kind of 12 to 16 years age group is what we work with.
Mm.
Whereas the girls that were going through our program, it was increasing.
Yeah. Wow.
So when you think about that in psychological terms, it's called what we're not only having an impact, in a positive direction, but we're also having this protective effect, right? We're
Right.
protecting so that girls, their efficacy doesn't decrease.
Hmm.
Not only is it not decreasing, it's actually going up. So, how does that manifest itself? So, like, in answer to your question, um, only a girl who has a sense of self-identity or a sense of self-efficacy, where my thoughts and my actions and beliefs are going to change my environment when I'm stuck in multi-generational poverty,
Oh, yeah.
caste or minority, discrimination, gender discrimination, and so on. So only a girl who has that really is going to be able to stand up, for example, against early marriage. So in certain communities where we work, marriage at 12, 13, 14 years old, it's starting to change now, which is great, but certainly when we started was fairly
Yeah.
common.
Yeah.
So we had all these instances of stories of girls who went through the program, knew what their strengths were, knew that they could make positive choices, knew how to communicate in a way that was, let's call it non-violent or non-aggressive, so that they could actually negotiate things with their parents. And they stopped
Yeah.
their marriage and were able to stay in school. And when
Wow.
you think about that, even the girls who maybe only delayed their marriage by 6 months, but at that age, every 6 months is a huge
Yeah.
increase in health outcomes, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, and even the multiplier effect of that is that, maybe a girl was only able to delay by 6 months or a marriage, or a year, excuse me, or 2 years, but when it comes time for her to have children, she's not going to do that to her child. So you have this
Yes.
what's called a
Yeah.
multiplier effect, where you're having an impact not just only in this generation, but also the next generation.
Mm, mm.
So that's really
Yeah.
um, so that's we have many stories of girls standing up to their parents, advocating for their right to
Yeah.
education when the
Yeah.
parents wanted to pull them out, kids' choices around substance abuse,
Mm.
taking their schooling more seriously. Uh, During COVID, there was a girl who used the tools that we had taught her, to convince her father to let her friends build a garden, a vegetable garden. I mean, they were literally going, on the verge of hunger,
Yeah.
so that they could sell it in a local market, which is something girls are not. The father didn't want to allow her to do that. Um, Several years ago, I had this guy that I knew, and we were still friends, in Kenya, who took our program
Mm.
called Youth First,
Mm.
and he transformed it and used it as a tool to help youth stand up to terrorist recruitment in a highly
Wow.
radicalized slum community in Kenya,
Yeah.
which I have
Wow.
visited, which was mildly terrifying, but I will
Yeah.
say, which I will say was really extraordinary to meet these
Yeah.
boys who had been trained in the program and then were using the tools in that to recruit other boys in a
Yeah.
direct sort of opposition to the recruitment
Yeah.
of radicalization. That's
Wow.
not something I ever dreamed or thought about was going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
can see there's many different sort of manifestations,
Yeah.
permutations
Yeah.
of this. Same with the teachers. The teachers have shared numerous stories of,
Yeah.
because we take the approach, if we don't model what we teach in our organization, then
Mm.
we can't do the work. And
Yeah.
if we
Yeah.
don't give teachers a transformational experience, they can't do the work, right? So
Yes.
teachers
Yeah.
often share stories with us about how their lives at home changed, their relationships with their spouse or their children changed. I joined.
Yeah.
I was on a visit to a particular village community once, and
Yeah.
to a school, and the school teacher. I've told this story before, but this school teacher quietly asked if he could talk to me a one-on-one, which is not something they will normally, do. And I
Right.
went over to him and he into a little corner, and he said, "I just wanted to thank you for saving my marriage." Which
Oh.
was like so sweet, because obviously that I didn't save his marriage and I had no intention of saving his marriage. I had a whole other set of intentions, but he said it had absolutely transformed how he dealt with his spouse and his
That's,
family,
oh,
his kids.
wow. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so there's many, many I think instances for us of
Yeah.
and thank God, because
Yeah.
that's a reward at the end of the day, right?
Exactly. And even these young girls talking to their parents, they it might have saved them 6 months of their lives, but also there's some effect, knock-on effect, surely with the parents as well.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Wow, Steve, I'm sure you could go on for a long, long
Yeah.
time. um, yeah, and you've mentioned before about your goal. You've already reached 4.2 million marginalized youth, and I just wonder what gives you the most hope about the future of inner well-being and attitudinal healing in the world? What gives you the most hope?
You know, it's interesting because something has shifted in the global development world, and in particular with the governments that we work with.
Yeah.
Um, like I said, I started with the Center for Attitudinal Healing in 2008. So I've been at this about 18 years. And I got to say, probably the first 10 to 12 years, there weren't a lot of people in government who had any idea what I was talking about.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
uh, the door was certainly slammed in my face more times than I can count. But somewhere in the last 5, 6 years has been and maybe COVID, and likely COVID has had a lot to do with COVID,
Mm.
social media,
Yeah.
rapidly rising increases in social inequities, financial inequities, health inequities.
Yeah.
In the last 5, 6 years has been this openness and
Mm.
urgency
Yes.
within the governments, where governments
Yeah.
are reaching out to us versus us trying to push our way in. I mean, it's definitely that dynamic has flipped.
Wow, that's great.
People are, so the bad news is they're worried. The good
Okay.
news is they recognize there's a problem and are really looking to figure out how to solve it. Not
Mm.
that
Mm.
we have a solution in any way, but I
Yeah.
think that is that's only possible because there's like an attitudinal shift that's
Mm.
happening, and it's being forced on us, right? And usually
Yeah.
change doesn't happen for most of us unless we're against the wall and it's being forced on us, right? So climate change is doing that, environmental destruction is doing that.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
the other
Yeah.
inequities that I just mentioned are doing that. Social media, AI, like people are exhausted, right? So these are like the hopelessness things.
Yeah.
The only path that I can see, and it's the one my whole adult life I've been dedicated to, is to helping people, particularly the next generation,
Yeah.
uh, to turn on that, internal light.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and give them the tools to help them do that, and the supportive environments to do that.
Mm.
Attitudinal healing, both in terms of the tools and the support, peer support type of model, I think
Yeah.
is fundamental to that.
Hmm.
When you add on some of the other tools that we teach around character strengths, which is a very evidence-based body of work that comes out of positive psychology, conflict resolution, social emotional learning skills, communication skills, all those kind of things. When you put that together in a package,
Yeah.
you're basically, I think you're helping a child basically not just to do a reset, but for themselves, but to also bring that out in some type of social action.
Yeah.
And I think
Yes.
that when you ask me what's giving me hope, what I would say is, if I had a criticism in general around many spiritual practices, at least the way we do them in the US, and
Mm.
psychology and introspection and all that,
Yeah.
uh, many people, I think, or for many of us, it stops with the self cultivation,
Mm.
the self transformation, rather than shifting that into social action. And I
Mm.
think
Okay.
this generation, I'm not saying that people haven't done this. And of course, in the 1960s, a lot of that happened as well. But there are, there is such a hunger that I see out there
Yeah.
consistently to
Mm.
take something that youth are learning, and to put that towards social good.
Yeah.
And that really gives me hope.
Mm. Mm. And you see that in the countries that you're working in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And
Yeah.
sadly, I see
Yeah.
that there more than I see that, in my
I
own
was just
country.
going to ask, yeah, yeah, what about back home? Yeah, yeah. Because as you were talking, I was just thinking, yeah, it'd be so good to take that into the schools here, what you're doing there, and yeah, see a little bit more
Well, it's
change here.
fascinating. There are the statistic. I mean, there are 1 billion youth
Yeah.
in low and middle income countries. 1 billion youth.
Wow. Yeah.
So if you look at that from a percentage of total population, you're looking at what, 12% or so of the total
Hmm.
world population.
Yeah.
12%. of the world's population are youth in low middle income countries.
Yeah.
That is a phenomenal
Mm. Yeah.
opportunity to shift dynamics in the world.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's why my focus is there
Yeah.
personally.
Mm.
And in my own country, and I can't speak so much for the UK or Scotland, but it's not that it's not there. Of course, it's there, but there's also a tremendous amount of anxiety, climate
Yeah.
anxiety, um,
Hmm.
all the destruction the social media is causing.
Yeah.
I don't see myself as qualified to comment on
Yeah.
whether we're seeing the same trends here or not. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think here there's a lot of hoops to get through too, to get into education and yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I found that in Australia when I was trying something out there and yeah, there's a lot of hoops to get through, you've got to get through the door of the even the principal's email sort
Oh
of
yeah,
thing too,
yeah.
So
But Australia, Australia
mm,
has been really one of the countries on the forefront of positive psychology. Mark
yeah,
Seligman, who was the founder,
yeah,
has done a lot of work there. I was there in Melbourne, I think about 5, 6 years ago, for
yeah.
one of the World Congresses. I mean, it's or at least there was a lot of good work going
Yes,
on
yeah,
there. But
yeah,
yes, getting into the school system, somehow I can go into the Ministry of Education in Rwanda and have an approval on a, go ahead, we'll do
yeah.
anything you want in
Mm.
half an hour. But if I tried to do that in my own country, it would, it
Yeah.
would take years.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah.
think you go where you feel like you can have the most impact. I've never been driven by nationalism or borders and like, oh, well, you have problems in your own country. Why don't you do it here? I mean, to me, a child is a
Yeah.
child. I don't care
Yes.
where you
Yeah.
live. Yeah.
Yeah, so true. Steve, yeah, you talked earlier on about this car accident and that being the turning point in your life. And it's like, oh, sometimes when things happen to us like that, it's such a blessing, isn't it? I mean, look
Best
what's
car accident I ever had.
Yeah, I was going to say that rolling action, look what's
Yeah.
happened because of it. Wow, wow. And for people who do listen to this podcast, they can have a look up on WorldBeing, the website too, to see what's going on and maybe, I don't know, donations or anything like that. I'm not too sure what happens there, but I'm sure it's all on your website.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
certainly a donate button. Should you wish to push it,
yeah,
please feel free.
yeah.
Or otherwise, just come and learn more about us and spread the word. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Steve, is there anything else you'd like to end with, leave the listeners with?
No, I was just maybe one thing I was thinking as we were speaking about, the principles of attitudinal healing and what I have found to be sort of most, uh, let's say, easily translatable universally, within the populations that we work.
Yeah,
And I think a couple of those that I was just thinking as we were talking, one is certainly, I would say that the core of our work is rooted in you may not be able to change your circumstances or what you were born into, but you can change your attitude and your perception and
yeah,
ultimately your choices. And if you just stop there, then that's a nice to have. Like, okay, but
mhm,
how? And that's where you have to do a lot of the other real work and helping children to understand more about their self-identity and what their strengths are and how they communicate and all those kind of things. But that fundamental premise is, I kind of think sort of the root of everything.
yeah,
But then if we talk about, ultimately it affects your choices, um, I think that's where a lot of the principles come into play, like the choice to choose forgiveness, as a strength,
yes,
to focus on
yeah,
the whole, not the fragments,
yeah, yeah,
see ourselves as teachers and students to each other. In traditional societies, that's a hard one to teach, but once we teach it, people get it.
yes,
Um,
yeah,
and then I would just
yeah,
say, most importantly of all, just the fundamental choice of every moment is an opportunity to choose love over
mhm,
fear. Love,
mm, yeah,
radical compassion is what I sort of that's my term for it.
yes, yeah,
Yeah, love and
yeah.
kindness.
Wow. Steve Leventhal, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Paula. It's
Really,
been great to hang out with you. Thank you so
You
much.
too. Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.